Today, the world holds its breath. Queen Elizabeth II becomes the first British monarch in history to celebrate a platinum jubilee, 70 years since her accession to the throne. This is no ordinary milestone. It's a once-in-history moment. No other sovereign of the United Kingdom has ever reigned this long. Behind these 7 decades lie changing eras, shifting governments, revolutions in technology, and through it all, the unwavering image of a woman who has become the living symbol of stability, duty, and grace.
News of this extraordinary event is echoing across the globe. Television broadcasts, newspaper headlines, social media feeds, all asking the same question. How did this seemingly delicate woman, wearing a crown, manage to hold together a nation and preserve its respect across such a fractured world? If we look closely, part of the answer is quite literally shining before our eyes, in that very crown. To honor this unparalleled anniversary, the UK is preparing for a summer of national celebration. Streets draped in Union Jacks, jubilant parades, and emotional retrospectives flooding every screen. But amid all the festivity, one symbol stands apart from the rest, the same one that adorned the Queen on her coronation day. A symbol of power, of legacy, of unbroken tradition. A symbol encrusted with history itself. That symbol is the imperial state crown.
Its presence is magnetic. The glint of diamonds, the depth of sapphires, the rich red of rubies, the regal curve of its arches, everything about it proclaims, "I endure." Yet behind this brilliance lies something far more compelling than beauty. It holds stories, not just of monarchs, but of empires, revolutions, victories, secrets and ceremonies that shaped the modern world.
The weight of the crown is not just physical, though nearly 2 kilograms of precious metal and stones certainly have heft. It's also symbolic. To wear it is to carry the burden of history, of expectation, of nationhood. This crown has witnessed coronations, wars, scandals, reforms, and jubilees. It has appeared in times of both triumph and crisis, but few truly know what changes it has undergone, what stones it holds, whose hands have carried it, or what unexpected dramas it has silently endured.
The history of the imperial state crown is not just a tale of gold and gemstones. It is the story of monarchy itself, told through an object that has accompanied sovereigns during the most pivotal moments of their reigns. And today, as Her Majesty marks 70 years of service, this crown once again finds itself in the spotlight, not as a museum piece, but as a living emblem of tradition, of duty, of timeless grace. And so begins our journey, through centuries and across monarchs, along the facets of diamonds and the velvet of thrones, because to understand the grandeur of today, we must first look into the past, into the luminous, storied history of this crowned masterpiece.
The imperial state crown is far more than a dazzling object placed atop a monarch's head at a moment of triumph. It is the essence of the British monarchy, its material embodiment. It speaks to the world without uttering a word, commanding respect, underscoring the continuity of power, and lending the figure of the sovereign a gravity that no title alone can convey. The crown as we know it today is the result of centuries of evolution. It has absorbed not only the finest in craftsmanship, but also the shifting language of symbols that has followed the English and later British monarchy since the 15th century. Its predecessor, the St. Edward's crown, has traditionally been used only once in a sovereign's reign, during the coronation. Heavy, sacred, monumental, it is more relic than regalia. Once the anointing is complete, it is returned to its vaults, and the imperial state crown takes center stage.
Unlike its ancient counterpart, the imperial state crown was created to be worn repeatedly, not just once. Lighter, more manageable, and carefully designed for ceremonial use, it accompanies the monarch at major public occasions, official portraits, state ceremonies, and, above all, the state opening of Parliament. Though the current version was finalized in the 19th century, versions of it have existed for much longer, each updated and refined to suit the era and the monarch who wore it. The present design was created in 1838 for Queen Victoria, then a young monarch leading Britain into an age of industrial and imperial expansion. This version of the crown blended historic jewels with modern styling, marking a new chapter in how the monarchy would be seen, both literally and symbolically. From that point forward, the crown began to appear not just in sacred rituals, but in public imagery, becoming part of how Britain visualized its sovereign.
Every monarch since has left a subtle mark on the crown. Some altered the setting of specific stones, others modified the arch or adjusted the velvet cap inside. These were not cosmetic choices. They reflected the character of each reign, because every monarch faced unique circumstances, and each sought to redefine the crown's presence for their people. This is how the imperial state crown came to hold its special place as the monarch's working crown, a ceremonial tool of power in action. It is the crown seen most frequently, the one immortalized in portraits and processions, the one that signals to the world that the monarch is not just a symbol, but a living, functioning head of state. Its silhouette is instantly recognizable, a visual code for continuity, authority, and history. Today, as Britain celebrates the Platinum Jubilee, the crown once again draws the public eye. But what makes it truly extraordinary is not just its craftsmanship or its prestige. It is what lies within, the astonishing details, each stone carrying its own story, each curve shaped by time. And now we look closer, into those details, into the silent language of the gems, to discover the stories the crown has guarded for centuries. A single glance at the imperial state crown is enough to know this is no mere ornament. It's a message, a silent one, encoded in gold, gemstones, and design. Every element is deliberate. Every jewel is more than decoration. It's a fragment of history, a symbol of legacy, a whisper from the past, preserved in sparkle. The crown doesn't just shine in the spotlight. It reflects the very weight of empire, monarchy, and centuries of ceremony. Encrusted with 2,900 gemstones, the crown tells a story not in words, but in carats. 2,868 diamonds, glimmering with the cold clarity of power. 273 pearls, soft and timeless. 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, and 5 rubies, each with its own tale to tell. At its center gleams one of the largest cut diamonds in the world, the legendary Cullinan II, also called the Second Star of Africa. Weighing 317 carats, this colossal gem was discovered in South Africa in the early 20th century and presented to the British Crown as a gesture of imperial loyalty. Positioned prominently on the front of the crown, it doesn't just shine, it commands. Embedded in the base is the St. Edward sapphire, said to have adorned the ring of Edward the Confessor, one of England's most revered early monarchs. For centuries, it's been considered a kind of protective charm, a holy relic hidden in plain sight. Its deep blue hue seems to pull time inward, anchoring the crown in a past long before cameras, coronations, or even Parliament. On the opposite side rests the Stuart sapphire, heavy with dynastic significance. A relic of the House of Stuart, this stone has survived exile, rebellion, and the bitter tides of succession. It serves as a reminder that monarchs rise and fall, but the regalia endures. And then there's the fiery Black Prince's ruby, nestled in the front cross above the Cullinan diamond. It's not actually a ruby, but a spinel, a stone that's seen blood and battle.
According to legend, it was gifted to Edward, the Black Prince, in the 14th century and worn in the Battle of Agincourt. It later adorned the crown worn by King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, the day he lost both his life and his kingdom. Few stones have seen history so intimately or survived it. Dangling beneath the central cross are 3 large pearl drops shaped like teardrops. According to tradition, they once belonged to Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. Whether legend or fact, the symbolism is rich. Pearls for wisdom, purity, and female power. A perfect tribute to a monarch who defied her age and defined an empire. Each gem, each facet, each shimmering surface is more than just precious material. It's a narrative. The crown doesn't speak, but through its stones, it remembers. You can read its history with your eyes if you know where to look. And that's what makes the imperial state crown unique among all objects of power. It's not simply beautiful, it's eloquent. It's layered with legacy, encrusted with moments of triumph and turmoil alike. It has stood before millions, crowned monarchs, and outlived dynasties. But despite its staggering value, historically and materially, the crown is still a working object, not locked in a vault, not sealed in glass. It's been placed on heads, carried in processions, and even dropped. Yes, this magnificent symbol of sovereignty has known not only reverence, but also mishaps. Because, like the monarchy itself, behind the splendor lies something unmistakably human. And that's where the story leads next. For all its grandeur and regal symbolism, the imperial state crown is not immune to simple human error. Despite its perfect appearance, this iconic object has experienced its share of awkward moments, unexpected stumbles, and scenes that blend royal solemnity with almost theatrical irony. Even the most sacred symbols can quite literally come crashing down. One of the most famous incidents occurred in 1845 during the state opening of Parliament. Queen Victoria was proceeding through the halls in full ceremony, while the crown, as tradition demands, was carried ahead of her on a velvet cushion. All was unfolding with the usual pomp, until, suddenly, the crown slipped. Right in front of the watching nobility and attendants, the crown fell to the ground. The damage was immediate. Jewels were dislodged, the arches bent, the entire structure visibly crushed. Later that day, Queen Victoria described it in her diary with dry wit. It was all crushed and squashed, like a pudding that had sat down. What was meant to be a moment of imperial majesty became something straight out of a comedy of manners. And yet, moments like these don't diminish the power of the crown. They humanize it. They remind us that monarchy is not just ceremony and perfection. It's also full of unpredictable, imperfect moments. Behind the scenes of royal pageantry, there are real people, real weight, and real challenges. Speaking of weight, the crown is physically heavy. Nearly 2 kilograms of solid gold, precious gems, and structural metal rest on the wearer's head. Queen Elizabeth II once candidly admitted in an interview that wearing the crown meant keeping her head perfectly upright. "You can't look down to read your speech. The crown would fall off," she said with a smile. Every movement had to be calculated. Wearing the crown wasn't just symbolic, it was physically demanding. Even a slight tilt of the neck could be disastrous. In fact, some monarchs were unable to wear it at all due to health reasons. That was the case with King Edward VII in 1902. He was meant to be crowned with the heavy St. Edward's crown, as tradition dictates, but a medical procedure just before the coronation made that impossible. Instead, the lighter imperial state crown was chosen, and from that moment on, it took on a new level of prominence in royal events. His successor, King George V, followed tradition and was crowned with St. Edward's crown.
But he exited Westminster Abbey wearing the imperial state crown, a gesture rich in symbolism. The sacred relic was left on the altar. The monarch walked out with the crown of governance, the crown of duty, the one used for real-world responsibility. These adjustments for comfort, health, even head size may seem minor, but they're deeply telling. They show that the crown adapts. It molds not only to the physical shape of each monarch, but to the spirit of the era they represent. It changes quietly, subtly, yet meaningfully. And it's in these quiet, almost invisible details, the hidden stitches, the reinforced arches, the extra padding, that the crown's true nature reveals itself. It is both a monument and a tool, both sacred and practical, both divine and deeply, deeply human. Moments of imperfection, like the time it fell or the times it became too heavy, don't weaken its mystique. They enhance it. Because we see that even this object, which stands for unshakable continuity, has been shaken, and yet it's still here, repaired, revered, and ready, as enduring as the institution it represents. The 20th century brought dramatic transformation to the world, and the imperial state crown was no exception. It was a century of collapsing empires, political revolutions, world wars, and redefined monarchies. The British monarchy itself was challenged, questioned, reshaped. And through it all, the crown remained, not frozen in time, but quietly evolving, adapting its form and meaning while never losing its essence as a symbol of authority and continuity. One of the most significant moments in the crown's modern history came in 1937, when it was reworked for the coronation of King George VI. After the unexpected abdication of his brother, Edward VIII, Britain urgently needed a figure of stability, someone to restore faith in the monarchy. George VI, a man never destined to reign, stepped into the role with a sense of duty rather than ambition. And alongside him, the crown also needed to be reshaped, both literally and symbolically. Jewelers reinforced the structure, adjusted the frame, repositioned stones, and refined its proportions to suit the new king. It was a subtle, respectful transformation, one that preserved tradition while acknowledging the moment. The crown took on a cleaner silhouette, more fitting for the new monarch and the spirit of a nation entering an uncertain era. George VI, like his father, wore the imperial state crown during state openings of Parliament, making it a core element of his ceremonial presence. But the outbreak of World War II would disrupt even the most enduring rituals. As bombs fell on London and the world spiraled into chaos, the grand pageantry of monarchy was set aside. Ceremonies were drastically reduced, and the crown itself was removed from public view. After 1938, it would not be worn again until 1948, when the country began to emerge from the shadows of war. Its absence during those years wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. Even the crown had to wait. Yet the monarchy endured. And in those quiet, crownless years, George VI became a figure of resilience. He remained in London during the Blitz, visited bombed-out neighborhoods, and delivered speeches that held the nation together. The crown may have been locked away, but its presence was felt, like a beacon waiting to shine again. When it finally reappeared in 1948, it wasn't just a return to tradition, it was a statement. Britain had survived, the monarchy still stood, and the crown was ready once more to represent not just a throne, but a people who had endured. Then, in 1952, the throne passed to a young woman who would redefine monarchy for the modern age, Queen Elizabeth II. Her accession marked a turning point, not only for the crown, but for the entire concept of royal symbolism. In a world that was rapidly shedding its colonial past, embracing television, modern politics, and global diplomacy, the monarchy had to reinvent itself, carefully, respectfully, but deliberately. Once again, the imperial state crown was modified. Its shape was slightly adjusted to fit the new queen's stature, but the changes were more than physical. They marked the beginning of a new relationship between the crown and the public, one shaped not by whispers in palace halls, but by television broadcasts, newsreels, and color photographs. The crown was no longer just an object of reverence. It had become an icon. The 20th century was a time when the crown needed to shine and wait, to endure world wars and navigate a changing empire, to serve monarchs both confident and reluctant, to return from view when the world was burning, and to return, not as a relic, but as a resilient living symbol. And as the century drew to a close, the crown was ready, polished, preserved, and prepared for whatever came next. When Princess Elizabeth became queen in 1952, she inherited not only a nation, a realm, and a role. She inherited symbols. Symbols of duty, sovereignty, and continuity. And among them, none was more prominent, more weighted with history than the imperial state crown. For her, it was never just a ceremonial object. It became a silent companion, a constant through decades of reign, a physical embodiment of the duty she accepted at just 25 years old and carried faithfully for a lifetime. Her 1953 coronation was a historic event, the first ever broadcast live on television. Millions across Britain and the Commonwealth watched, some for the first time ever, the inner workings of a royal coronation. And amid the gold, the silks, the anointing, and the oaths, one image stood out. The Queen, seated on the coronation throne, wearing the imperial state crown, its gems glinting beneath the studio lights. It marked not only a beginning, but a transformation, the timelessness of monarchy meeting the age of modern media. But what we didn't see on camera was the weight, not just the symbolic, but the very literal weight of that crown. Crafted from solid gold and precious gems, it is physically demanding to wear. The crown was specially adjusted for Elizabeth, lowered slightly to suit her height and frame. Still, it was no easy task. Years later, in a rare interview, she recalled with wry humor, "You can't look down to read the speech. If you did, the crown would fall off." It was said with a smile, but it revealed a very real truth. Even majesty has its limits. Every movement while wearing the crown required discipline, grace, and quiet strength, much like her reign itself. After her coronation, Queen Elizabeth II began a new tradition of her own, appearing year after year at the state opening of Parliament wearing the imperial state crown. It became one of the most iconic images of her reign, the Queen robed in state regalia, seated on the throne, flanked by symbols of sovereignty. For many, these scenes became synonymous with monarchy itself. On rare occasions, she opted for the George IV state diadem, a lighter, more manageable headpiece. This wasn't a break in tradition, but a practical adaptation. As the years passed and age naturally took its toll, the crown became increasingly difficult to wear. And yet, it was always present. Even if not worn, it was carried ahead of her, resting on a velvet cushion, a quiet yet powerful symbol of the authority she still embodied. What's remarkable is how the crown evolved in public perception alongside her. Over the decades, the imperial state crown became part of her image, just as much as her voice, her wave, or her silhouette. The Queen and the crown became inseparable, not because she wore it every day, but because it was always near, always ready, always relevant. A particularly intimate moment came in the 2018 documentary The Coronation, where the Queen sat before the crown, examining it like an old friend. She spoke of it plainly, almost fondly, admiring the craftsmanship, remembering the weight, laughing gently at its impracticalities. "It's very solid, isn't it?" she said with a knowing smile. In those quiet moments, viewers saw something rare, a monarch reflecting not just on a symbol of power, but on a lifetime lived beneath it. To Elizabeth II, the crown was never hers. It was entrusted to her, a sacred object she bore not for glory, but out of duty. She treated it not with entitlement, but with reverence. It was not a trophy, it was a responsibility, one she upheld with unshakable grace. As the years went on, even when the crown was no longer worn regularly, its meaning only deepened. It no longer needed to rest on her head to carry weight. Its mere presence, in the room, in the ceremony, in the memory, was enough. By the twilight of her reign, the imperial state crown had become more than regalia. It was a mirror, reflecting not just the institution of monarchy, but the character of the woman who had worn it longer than any other in history. It told her story without speaking. It glowed with legacy. And when she finally chose to set it aside, no one questioned her right to do so. The crown had served her, she had served the crown, and both had become timeless together. When Queen Elizabeth II wore the imperial state crown for the final time at the state opening of Parliament in 2016, few realized it would be her last appearance with it on her head. In the following years, she began to favor the lighter George IV state diadem, a practical choice reflecting her age and health. From that moment, the crown quietly transitioned into a new chapter, one not of retirement, but of silent authority. Though it is no longer worn, the crown has not lost its relevance. On the contrary, in stepping away from regular use, it has entered a new phase, a state of eternal presence. Once a working instrument of monarchy, it has become something even more profound, a timeless symbol of legacy, devotion, and the continuity of the British crown. Today, the imperial state crown still appears at key state occasions, but not atop the monarch's head. Instead, it is carried before the sovereign, presented with the same solemnity and grandeur as ever. During the most recent ceremonies, it has been borne by the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Marquess of Cholmondeley, held aloft on a velvet cushion. As it glimmers under the lights and meets the eyes of millions watching around the world, it continues to command attention, a symbol still very much alive. When not in ceremonial use, the crown rests in its official home, the Jewel House at the Tower of London. Displayed behind bulletproof glass, surrounded by tight security and hushed reverence, it is one of the most visited royal objects on Earth. Each year, millions of visitors come to stand before it, some in awe, some in silence, others with tears in their eyes, confronting not just its beauty, but its gravity. Because this crown is not simply a treasure, it is a living artifact, a piece of history that has seen monarchs crowned and buried, empires rise and fall, and wars fought in its name. And though it now rests behind glass, its power has not dimmed, it has crystallized. Today, the crown no longer belongs just to the monarch. It belongs in many ways to the people, to history itself. It has transcended the realm of royalty and entered the world's collective imagination. It appears in films, documentaries, novels, currency, postage stamps, museum exhibits, and dreams. Its silhouette is instantly recognizable. It is not just British, it is iconic. And yet, for all its fame and symbolism, the crown still holds a deeply personal connection to those who wore it. Queen Elizabeth II, though famously reserved, spoke about the crown only twice in her long reign. Once in a television program in the 1970s about the crown jewels, and again in the 2018 documentary, The Coronation. In both instances, she handled the crown with her own hands, not ceremonially, but tenderly. She looked at it not with distance, but familiarity, as one might regard an old companion. She remembered its weight, its structure, its imperfections. She joked about its size, marveled at its craftsmanship, and in those few moments reminded the world that even the most powerful symbols are woven into human experience. These rare glimpses revealed a side of the crown often unseen, not just as a national icon, but as a keeper of personal memory, a crown not only worn, but lived with, a silent witness to moments of doubt, strength, fear, and triumph. Now, the imperial state crown continues to serve, not through wear, but through presence. It doesn't need to sit atop a monarch's head to fulfill its purpose. It simply needs to be there, watching, waiting, reminding. It is more than gold and gems. It is trust passed from generation to generation. It is duty forged into metal. And above all, it is continuity, unbroken, unshaken, and waiting patiently for the next chapter in history. The imperial state crown is not just a relic of the past. It is a living thread stitched through centuries of monarchy, silently linking sovereigns across generations. In a world that races forward, where traditions fade, institutions transform, and even thrones evolve, the crown remains unchanged. It doesn't need to adapt, it doesn't need to prove its worth. Its power lies precisely in its stillness. The future of the crown does not rest in how often it is worn, but in what it represents. For future monarchs and generations to come, it will serve not merely as a regal adornment, but as a reminder of responsibility, of service, of the enduring weight of legacy. The crown is not claimed, it is entrusted. It is passed not as a prize, but as a burden and a blessing, a symbol of duty, not possession. The weight of the crown is not just physical, though nearly 2 kilograms of precious metal and stones certainly have heft. It's also symbolic. To wear it is to carry the burden of history, of expectation, of nationhood. This crown has witnessed coronations, wars, scandals, reforms, and jubilees. It has appeared in times of both triumph and crisis, but few truly know what changes it has undergone, what stones it holds, whose hands have carried it, or what unexpected dramas it has silently endured. Even in the digital age, where influence is counted in views and trends, and where leadership is streamed and liked, the crown has a kind of irreplaceable physicality. It cannot be replicated in pixels or rendered in holograms. It exists in weight, in texture, in time. It is history you can see and feel. There is something deeply moving in the idea that a crown, originally created for one sovereign, is passed from monarch to monarch without change. Its shape doesn't bend to fashion. Its message doesn't shift with culture. It belongs to no one, and yet it commands all. Each new monarch wears it not to make it their own, but to submit to it. And that is how it will continue. It will remain in the Tower of London, drawing millions to its silent glow. It will reappear when called, not as decoration, but as declaration. It will continue to inspire stories, art, debate, and devotion. It will be revered, questioned, admired, but never ignored. Because the imperial state crown does not govern, it does not speak, it simply is. And in that unwavering presence lies its true power. It is eternal.